I feel like I'm way more excited about this video than I should be, but I can't help it. I can't. Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Wright and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are wondering where my episode 2 is in my Dear YouTuber series, I'm choosing not to skimp on quality so that I can get that out faster. I would rather take my time, and if it takes me a couple months in between videos to get something good like that out, I would rather do that. But working 3 jobs and filming for YouTube is very, very, very difficult. So I've been seeing a lot of these houseplant videos trending lately, and I really wanted to film one because I have a lot of houseplants, and I'm actually just going to focus on the ones in my living room today, which is still a lot. So I'm going to show you guys those today. So I think I'm going to start out from smallest to biggest, and then we'll just kind of go from there. All right, so the first plant that is in my living room is this little guy. This is a Jade plant. These are very, very popular house plants, and it's because you don't have to really water them. They like bright indirect sunlight, and you can let this completely dry out in between waterings, which is usually like maybe once a week is when I would say you'd water it. If you are in an apartment that doesn't have a lot of airflow, if you don't have a ceiling fan, then it might take a little bit longer for the soil to dry out in this guy. So just be very careful. If you can stick your finger in the soil 1 to 2 inches down and it's dry, that's when you need to water this. All right, so I have 2 houseplants in my collection that I have no idea what they are. This is one of them. It didn't have a label. It was borderline dead when I bought it. It was very, very light green, which means that it was on its way out the door. So I bought it, and I just started keeping the soil moist because the soil was bone dry when I got this. So I just keep the soil moist, and I keep it on the top shelf in the corner of my room. I have a ladder shelf that pretty much goes almost to the ceiling, and I put this at the very top. So it gets medium to low window light throughout the day, and it is kind of loving it right now. So I'm just going to leave it there. All right, so the next plant that I want to show you is a Philodendron Scandens. This is a very, very common house plant. They actually call this a Brazil plant, but it is a good house plant because it survives very, very well in low light, but it can also thrive near a window and very bright indirect sunlight. I actually have 2 of these, and I'm going to show you why in just a second. When we get, my next one's a little bit larger, so I'm going to have to show you that because I'm going to stick with my smallest to largest. But if you can actually look at this, pardon the dust on it, this thing is sprouting new leaves and vines everywhere, and I think that's actually because someone took a whole bunch of different cuttings from a larger one and just shoved it in a plant for sale. And that's just now getting a good root into the soil, which is going to allow you to pretty much basically put this anywhere, and it's just going to start growing. That's one of the reasons why these are good house plants, because no matter where you put them in your house, it's going to be okay. If you buy this anywhere, the card is going to say, let soil dry in between waterings. You can actually let the soil stay dry a little bit longer than you think because it is used to not getting a lot of water for long periods of time, and then coming a rainfall, it is used to getting soaked. So I usually just let this stay dry for a little while, and then when the soil starts to pull away from the inside of the planter's pot, then I'll just drench the soil until it's completely soaked. And a little tip while we're at it, make sure that you have holes in the bottom of your pot so that it drains properly. If not, then your plants will get root rot and they will start dying from the bottom up. All right, so this next plant is called a Peperomia Variegata, which is a mouthful. I get it. If you're not into plants, and I know a lot of my viewers that are subscribed to me are not focused on that niche coming out of my channel, But the Peperomia species or genus is one of the most popular plants for houseplants. And if you ask most botanists, or if you ask anyone that is into plants in general, they're going to say that Peperomia is one of their favorite types of genus for houseplants, or just in general, because of the versatility. And if you guys actually really like this video, I can talk about that and show you a lot more Peperomia, because there's like 17,000 different types. But this specific one, I actually just got him at Lowe's, and he was a bit smaller than he was now. You can tell he's leaning a little bit because of the window. It's twisted this way, and a lot of plants will actually do that, so you need to turn them, and I don't turn mine like I'm supposed to because I would constantly be turning plants. But I got this guy because of the variegation in his leaves. I just thought it was beautiful, and I wanted something like this. Instead of having just a flat sea of green, I wanted some variation, and that's where the variegated plants come in. This guy, I'm probably going to keep him in his planter pot as long as I possibly can, because Peperomia tend to like being root bound and kind of being tight. So until the roots start coming out, I don't repot or replant anything. And from what I've learned in the research that I've done for these types of plants, they usually don't hate being root bound, and they don't ever grow their roots out of the bottom of their planter. So I'm just going to let this guy get as big as he possibly can until I 100% have to replant him. I like to keep the soil moist on these, but not drenched, because if you feel the leaves, the thicker and the more succulent the leaves are on a plant, the less you have to water it, because the leaves are designed to hold a lot of moisture and water, and that's the same for the stem. So that's just a good general rule of thumb. The thinner the leaves are, the more you're going to need to water them when the soil dries out. But if the leaves are kind of thick, then it's okay to go a little bit longer in between waterings, because that plant is used to holding on to water because it doesn't know when it's going to get water again. Hopefully that made sense. It completely does to me. Yeah. All right, guys, so this next plant is a Peperomia Variegata. It's another variegated Peperomia, but it's different. It's a different species, and I'm going to show you this up close if my camera will focus. So this guy actually has a lot more leaves, and they're smaller. So the leaves look very similar to the other one. However, it is a different genus and a different species. So it is still variegated. It has the beautiful green. The green actually is a little bit brighter when you have them sitting next to each other. And since I have several plants, I have them scattered out, but I have the like plants grouped together so that the care instructions are not extremely difficult for me. But this guy, I think he is absolutely beautiful, and I'm obsessed with houseplants, so I had to have him. And it's exactly the same type of care that you would give for the other one. It does have very succulent leaves when you feel it, which means that it is going to retain water for longer. So you just let him dry out in between waterings. And I keep the soil moist but not drenched, because you don't want to overwater these plants. That's what makes them good house plants, is the fact that you don't have to care for them very much. Just make sure it gets the sun it needs, and make sure the soil doesn't get bone dry. That's it. All right, so this next plant, he is actually a golden pothos, or a variegated pothos. And it was kind of weird. He was extremely variegated when I first bought him. He was so variegated when I first bought him that I thought he was beautiful, but I thought he was going to die. One of the reasons I bought this guy, and I actually bought him at Walmart. I check Walmart and Lowe's for discount plants, although some of these I did have to order online, because when I want something, I want it, and I don't want anything else. So and that's a big problem that I have, and it gets me in trouble a lot, but whatever. So this guy was extremely variegated. When you have a plant that is variegated, and by variegated, again, I mean that the leaves are discolored like this, if my camera is zooming and I can't tell. So when you have the discoloration in leaves like that, it's beautiful, and it varies from plant to plant. The variegation, how much it's variegated and how discolored the leaves are, depends on the amount of sunlight it gets. So if a plant is getting a crap load of sun, it's going to be more variegated because it doesn't need as much chlorophyll to feed itself. But when you take a variegated plant and you move it inside or you move it to the shade, then the variegation actually starts to go away and the leaves start getting a lot darker than this does. And you can see from my plant that the greenery has gotten darker and this is a lot less variegated than it was because it's increasing its chlorophyll to make sure that it can sustain itself. But I want this variegation to come back. So not only do I have this setting beside a light, I actually have it underneath a grow light also, which I just started a couple days ago. So I'm hoping that the variegation starts to come back, because not only is it getting indirect sunlight from the window, but I have supplemental light coming to it now, so it should come back within a couple of weeks. And another thing before we move on to the next plant, and yes, there is more, if you can take a look at this, there's little baby leaves sprouting out of the back of this. If you can see new growth or baby leaves, that means that it is in appropriate conditions and that it's doing okay. So if you notice that it looks wilted, or if it has burn spots on the leaves that you didn't have before, that probably means you need to move your plant to a different spot in the house. But if you can notice that it's starting to get new growth like this, then that means that you've met the conditions that it needs and that the plant's doing okay. This guy is a Pilea peperomioid is the name of it, but to everyone else, it's actually called a friendship plant. So you can buy really small ones of these for like $3 or $4. You can buy medium sized for $10 or $15, which is what this is. And you can actually buy ones that are like double the height for more. But honestly, at the rate this thing grows, get the small one, because this is already double the size of when I bought it. And if you'll notice, I'm going to tilt this and hope that this doesn't fall out of the pot. If you'll notice, when you look in here, there's two different plants spurring out. Now this plant splits at the root underneath the soil and starts growing new plants beside it, and that's kind of its defense mechanism for if something eats it or if it gets damaged, then it can split underneath the soil and just start growing a plant beside the damaged one. But the reason they call this a friendship plant is because you can actually cut underneath the soil the other plant off entirely and just stick it in another pot of soil. That will root up very easy. And you give it to your friends. And it does that so quickly that you can just keep cutting and giving to other people. I actually haven't even tried propagation or cutting, which is the technical term for cutting pieces of your plant off and growing them separately, because I'm scared to. But that's one of the reasons they call this a friendship plant, because it does it so quickly. All right, so this was a project of mine, and I think it's starting to get out of hand. When I was first learning about plants, I learned that if you put plants into a terrarium, that it increases the humidity, and it's more like they have their own natural habitat, so they'll start growing faster. So I put this little guy in here. Don't know what he is. He's the other one. I put this plant in here, which is basically just a foliage plant, quote unquote. And then I put a rabbit's foot fern in the middle because I heard that they were very hard to take care of and that they like staying damp and moist, so I stuck them in there for the humidity. Well, the rabbit's foot fern has doubled in size. He was not this big, and now he's growing out of the pot entirely. And this thing was like this big when I got him and put him in here. And I don't know how or why or when, but once he got this big, within 4 days, this sprouted up entirely and is just growing another limb completely outside. I don't even know if you can see that on camera, but like it just shot up out of nowhere. And I have another one doing it right here. I'm surprised that my cat has not eaten them. I've got a polka dot plant in here, but he's about to die, so I don't even know if you can count him. This thing, I actually just water it once a month because when you water things in a terrarium, number one, you have to be very careful because if you overwater it, it doesn't have drainage holes. So all of the plants can get root rot and just die. So that's why I put the rocks at the bottom of the terrarium so that it can seep down past the soil into the rocks and just kind of sit underneath it and not necessarily touch the soil that much if I accidentally overwater it. But since it is in a kind of mini contained environment, it's going to go way, way longer without you having to re-water it. So the soil is going to stay moist longer and it's going to help keep the humidity in. And that's why this has kind of exploded the way that it is, because it is perfect conditions for it. All right, so the next plant I've technically kind of already showed you before. If you remember that Philodendron Scandens, which is a Brazil plant, the next plant that I have is pretty much exactly the same thing, except this is the variegated version of that. And for those of you who don't own a plant and you may or may not be completely uninterested, variegation, like with the pothos, the variegation version has different color in the leaves in the variations. So this one has stripes going through the leaves. And this is one of the first plants that I bought. I thought it was beautiful. I had to have it. The Philodendron genus is absolutely beautiful. It's probably my favorite genus right now, and that's far down the rabbit hole I've gone. But this plant, I had to get this because of the striations. And it is a plant that a lot of people get for the vining purposes. This plant vines up very well and quick, and it will trail up and down pretty much anything that you have sitting next to it. So I purposely put this beside my pothos, which is also a vining plant, by the way, on my ladder shelf next to my window. So that way my pothos and my variegated philodendron can start vining up and down. It's gonna take a little bit because they were really small when I bought them. Generally, the bigger the plant is, the more expensive it is. And there's absolutely no reason for you to have to do that. Get the cheaper version, which is smaller, and grow it yourself. All right, so last but not least, this monster of a plant. I didn't realize how big this was when I bought it, because it tricked me. I think it did it on purpose. And I'm going to explain that after I show you what it is. But this gigantic plant is called a prayer plant. And the reason that it's called a prayer plant is because during the daytime, the leaves are a lot lower than during the nighttime. It lets its leaves down, the vine, everything comes down, and it lays its leaves flat so that it can get more sun. Well, in the evening, it moves a lot, and it raises its leaves back up, and it almost points completely upward like the back is here. The whole plant does that. It points completely straight up, and it's constantly doing that day in, day out. So when I saw this plant, I knew I wanted a prayer plant, and I saw this guy, and he was just kind of condensed around the whole pot. And I was like, okay, well, that's like the perfect size. So I took him home. I set him on my coffee table because he was pretty much the perfect size. And it was later in the evening. I did my routine, went to bed, got up the next morning. And when I got up the next morning, I come out of my bedroom and I looked on my coffee table to make sure that my cat has not eaten my plants again. And this guy was open and spread out and was gigantic and nearly covering almost the whole coffee table. I don't know what I'm doing right. You let the water, or you let the soil dry out in between waterings. So he was overwatered when I bought him. I haven't watered him in a very long time, and the soil is still slightly moist, so I'm going to let that dry out before I water him again. But he's getting medium to high light, and he can function and do well in low light. You don't want to put them in completely direct light because these leaves will burn very, very easily. They're like paper thin. They have a velvety texture on them, so they don't like high humidity. But in general, it's a good houseplant to have. So, and it's also difficult to kill. So if you want to try out a houseplant, I would honestly recommend one of these, but not one this size. He has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 new leaves popping out. That'll probably pop out within the next week. And he's rapidly growing, so he just really likes my apartment. And I'm gonna have to repot him soon, but I love him. He's just big. All right, thank you guys so much for watching this random ass video about my houseplants. I just really wanted to do one because I've watched so many of these videos, and like the amount of information that I have gathered, I feel like I'm ready to share with someone. And although this video wasn't necessarily structured perfectly, it was just me making a video because I'm excited about my houseplants and the fact that I can keep all of these alive and that they're doing well. And I just really wanted to share that with someone, and I wanted to see if you guys were interested in this. I can make some more videos on this if you want. Please put a comment down below. Let me know if you like it or if you didn't like it. Like this video because I'm excited, and if I'm excited and we're all friends, you should be excited for me. By proxy, yes. And subscribe to my channel because I have an awesome series that I'm working on, and although at this rate it's probably going to take me years to get it done, I'm going to get it done. And if you liked episode 1, that's not even scratching the surface of what we're doing. I'll put a card in the corner so that you can see what we're doing and check out episode 1. So I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you guys in the next one.